Greetings and welcome to the Neurotheology YouTube channel. In this video, I want to talk about reasons to read Secularity and Science, what scientists around the world really think about religion, by Elaine Howard Ecklund and her team. This book is fantastic on so many different levels, but in particular, a lot of people feel as if science and religion are diametrically opposed. And this book is the synthesis or some of the insights from the most comprehensive study of scientists' views of religion around the world ever undertaken. Over 20,000 surveys, 600 interviews, countries all over the world. So it's a brilliant book and lots of reasons to read it. Elaine Howard Ecklund, she is a professor and the chair of social sciences at Rice University. She has already done other research in other areas. One of her interesting findings from her previous research is that nearly 50% of natural and social scientists at top U.S. universities have some form of religious identity that is often very different in character from the religious identities found amongst the general public. So that is just one finding she's found in her previous research, but she, in this particular study with her team, have really shown that what it is to be religious or spiritual within science, there is a lot of diversity there, and some of the assumptions, some of the prejudice that many of us bring into the dialogue can sometimes be completely erroneous. So some of the findings she and her team come up with, I just want to share 4 of them. One is that around the world, there are more religious scientists than we might think. So her study in countries all over the world with her team found all sorts of different understandings of religiosity, coming from Hindu, Buddhist, all different perspectives, Christian, people that are spiritual, not religious. So all these differences, and that really looking in and really asking scientists what they believe really gave a lot of insight into it. One of the second findings that she and her team came up with is that scientists, even some atheist scientists, see spirituality in science. So on that particular point, Elaine Howard Ecklund has another book. It's called Varieties of Atheism in Science. A lot of times, our prejudice or our assumptions about groups can limit the perception of what the reality is. And, amongst any group, there's going to be a lot of diversity. So that particular finding also relates to the other book that she wrote, which I would also highly recommend. A third finding that she and her team came up with is that the conflict perspective on science and religion is an invention of the West. Now, on this particular point, it's interesting. Some of the research they did was in India, and in the West there are many examples of science or people of religious faith being very diametrically opposed to one another. But in some other countries, the idea of that is completely erroneous or really an invention of the West. So it's an interesting perspective that she and her team also came up with on that particular point as well. A fourth point that she and her team found was that religion is not kept out of the scientific workplace. Now, a lot of people, may be familiar with Stephen Jay Gould's argument of non-overlapping magisteria, that, abstractly, that, science and religion having their own truths, abstractly or theoretically, that makes a lot of good sense. But when people practice science in the lab, they bring with them generally a lot of their bias, a lot of their belief, a lot of their person, and that's going to impact their science. It's going to impact their how they interrelate with people. So one of the findings they found is that people that are religious, that are in science, don't necessarily always talk about their religion. That they feel there's discrimination toward them, either fear of funding, but there's also people that bring into the lab their religious identity either through moral integrity, social justice, that kind of thing. So even if they don't necessarily talk about their faith, they're bringing it into the lab. And then there's also talk of people that are religious have some prejudice against people going into science. So that's another dynamic where there are some people that feel afraid of going into science because their own particular religious community might find science as negative or be fearful of it. So there are so many reasons to read this particular book. I also recommend, she has another book called Why Science and Faith Need One Another. As my channel or my websites really advocate, is that, no matter what our differences are, we have so much to learn from one another. Highly recommend this book to you. I also want to always recommend my websites, ChristianNeuroscience.com, that has all sorts of neuroscience resources that are from a Christian perspective, but I also have spiritualneuroscience.com that also has all sorts of references and information from secular, atheist, as well as diverse faith perspectives, such as Buddhist or Hindu, or all sorts of different ways of looking at it. So highly recommend this book to you, and I hope you're doing well. Thanks so much for being here. Take care.